really exciting to be involved in these meetups with so many enthusiastic educators. Thank you so much. Like Shraddha said, you've given up your Saturdays. I'm always really taken aback by how generous people are with their teachers are with their time. So thank you. And it's great that you're here to learn about unit planning and building statements of inquiry. This is a little bit about myself. I've been in education just over 20 years, and I do have a really strong focus on social and emotional learning. I think as educators, it's really important that we give our students the opportunity to take risks and work collaboratively and to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. There's a little bit more info. I won't go through that information, but if you do want to connect with me, I also work as a consultant. I visit schools. You can connect with me through the IB PYP NYP community network on Facebook. I think we're around 13,000 educators strong, and it's a great community that really shares a lot of resources and learning. And please, like Shraddha said, share your learning, use a hashtag NYP meetup. I'd love to see some of the statements of inquiry that you develop. You can contact me on Twitter at Nat Jensen too. So before we start, you'll see there's a little share button in red. I would really love for this to be as interactive as possible, to get your fingers working a little bit, pop some ideas and some thoughts and reflections into the chat box. So when you see that little share button come up, please get ready to share, and Shraddha will be there to share it with me. Okay, so the very first thing to get you thinking and to get you moving is just a check-in. So answer one of these questions or all of these questions. How are you feeling today? How's your motivation? What's your goal? And if there's any questions that you have. I know some teachers are still teaching remotely, which is remarkable. And for all of you teachers who are still teaching remotely, well done. It's very difficult, I know. As teachers, we love that connection. So a little check-in like this you can use with your students, or if you're a coordinator with your teachers, just to connect, to establish relationships and to reflect. So do we have an idea of how people are feeling today, Shraddha?
I'm going to start with Ida's answer, which was just a simple great. Glad to hear that, Ida. Barb says, excited to get more ideas for improving SOIs. I feel like I'm pretty good at it, but can be better. Yep. Freya says, feeling good. She's being, no, I think Freya, you're being harsh on yourself. She's saying she's not great at writing SOIs. She's Freya, just started, so she's very excited to be, learning more here. Amanda says she's feeling a bit tired. It's the midnight. Amanda, thanks so much for joining us in the midnight. She's also excited to be pulling an all-nighter for this conference. Wow, thanks, Amanda. So I think just a diverse group here, quite a few people talking about being excited to learn more about the SOIs. And Jacqueline says, how much do SOIs evolve with student inputs rather than sticking with your clear plan? I know, Nat, you have some things that you're covering around that area. So yeah, pretty diverse group in there, Nat.
Yeah, that's a great question, because the statement of inquiry, like the unit planner, they're fluid and flexible. We are really responsive to our students. So there's some great questions, and thank you to the people who are staying up so late. So formulating a strong statement of inquiry. You're all here, you've joined up to this workshop. Have a little think about, why is it important to develop a really strong statement of inquiry? So, we're dedicating a whole workshop to this. What is the purpose of having a statement of inquiry? We know that the statement of inquiry sets that conceptual understanding in the global context to frame our learning, but why do we want to have a statement of inquiry that's really strong? So I might see if Shraddha can share with me some ideas. What is the reason?
Yeah. So Greg Nat says it's the inquiry foundation for a unit, so it should govern all that you do. Eric says it's to help students engage better with the big idea. Victor says it's to frame learning so that it becomes transferable. Amyaj says, it drives the learning and connects it to the real world. So a lot of folks who were talking about the transferability as well as helping students engage with the big idea and giving them a strong foundation for inquiry.
Yeah.
Poi says, it's also a good way to start off a debate and it helps identify what the larger unit's about. And hence a lot of people were talking about providing the foundation, giving it a framework, and really just holding the whole thing together.
Yeah.
Is I think just a summary of a lot of these chats that are coming in.
Love it. Yep. Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that in a lot of the responses, it was about the students, drawing the students in, the big idea, making sure it's transferable. Thank you, Shraddha. So, yeah, draw the students in. The statement of inquiry really represents what we'll be learning and why. And it's important that it is meaningful to students. So the language is meaningful and the unit is guided by the statement of inquiry. So our inquiry questions are drawn from and inspired by the statement of inquiry. Teachers and students develop questions to explore the statement of inquiry. So it's really important. And I love that in the chat, I can't remember who it was, Shraddha, but said, it draws into the big idea. Why are we dedicating so much time to this unit, which is really important to get the students buy-in and having that strong statement of inquiry, because our summative assessment is linked to it as well. So we'll work through a little bit more. And this is, I know I've made you work really hard these first few slides. This is the last slide that I'm going to get you to type in the chat box before I start. This is a blob tree developed by Pip Wilson, and you can use this for a number of activities. But what I'm using it for now is when you're thinking about developing a statement of inquiry, and we all sit in our collaborative learning teams, and we've got our content, we've got our state and national requirements that we're doing, and we're sitting down with our statement of inquiry. How do you feel about developing it? So choose one of the little blob characters. It might be, are you the little blob character swinging, having fun with the statement of inquiry? Are you able to help other people, giving them a little lift up? Yeah. So I'll just pause and reflect on this one. Have a little think, and I'll pass it to you, Shraddha.
So responses have started coming in. I feel like the blob tree is something interesting to everyone. So Annie says, she feels stressed out sometimes, but other times she's okay. A few folks saying that they feel a little confused. Mia says a bit chaotic, so probably the one swinging on the rope, happy but clueless. And Jacqueline says she's the one clutching onto the tree on the second branch. Adam says, I feel like I sometimes have to force the key concept and the related concepts into the statement. So it's a little hard to make it accessible to students. So I would guess, maybe one of the blocks that's hanging, maybe. Eric said, I want to be the helper at the center bottom, just helping.
Aww.
Yeah, that's great. Julie says one hanging on the branch at the bottom. So it's a few folks saying they're falling off the tree. So you have many different blobs who are present in the session today, Nat.
That's brilliant. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So let's start off, and we touched on this right at the beginning. What is the big idea? So when you're sitting in your collaborative teams, it's always really good to start with what is the big idea for this unit? We want it to be something that's purposeful, engaging, and connected. So a really great way to help this process before we moving on to our statement of inquiry is to go through a mind map. And you can do this on a big shared piece of paper in your collaborative groups, or if I know a lot of teachers have shared process journals that they scribble in. Start writing down, what are we learning? Why are we learning it? Comments about, the topic or idea. Why is it worthy of inquiry? Start thinking about how will we know that the children have learned what we want them to learn. And you'll see to the right, I've got use your subject specific guide. If you have your subject specific guide at hand right now, I really suggest just keep it close to you, because we can work together with statements of inquiry. Your subject-specific guide is really important. It has all the information in there, and I'll keep referring to it. Collaborative teams generate free-flowing thoughts about your ideas, write down some key concepts and related concepts. So before we move on to the statement of inquiry, we're going to develop a conceptual understanding. And the conceptual understanding statement used to be a requirement, but it's not anymore for the MYP unit planner. But it's super helpful when you are planning a statement of inquiry. So the conceptual understanding statement should be broad, should be short and sweet, should be student-friendly in language, and as much as possible, not subject-specific. And going back to, you know, the statement of inquiry being transferable across subjects. So I'm going to go through this really methodically, and as you get used to writing your statements of inquiry and conceptual understandings, this will flow a bit quicker, but I'm going to go quite slow with this, and it's almost like a recipe. So developing a conceptual understanding, you've got your key concept. So you're going to choose one key concept and two related concepts. And this is where you need your subject-specific guide, because you're going to have a look at the key concepts that your subject is responsible for and the related concepts. So if you do have your subject guide, have a look. So these are the 16 key concepts of the MYP, and these are to be explored across the curriculum. So in each subject, we are not responsible for all 16, we're responsible for about 3 or 4. So what I want you to do is, if you have your subject guide, if not, this is what we do in the process, is to look at the definition. So rather than just looking at aesthetics or identity, have a look at the definition, and you'll decide on one key concept that best fits your unit. So for maths, it's form, logic and relationships you're responsible for. Health and PE, relationships, communication, change, and development. And there's a lot of crossover. So these are the 16. You should be really familiar with your subject area, which 3 or 4 you're responsible for. So once you've chosen that key concept, in your collaborative groups, you're going to talk about, why did we choose that one? Why have we chosen aesthetics over form or systems over relationships? Why is that important? Here are some of the related concepts, and you'll see them in your guide, and you'll see that there are a lot of crossover as well. So PE and design have adaptation and function, mathematics and Lang and Lit. So you'll find these in your guide, but it's really important that you are familiar of all the key and related concepts for your particular subject area. So once you've had a look at the related concepts, have a look at the definitions and choose 2 of the related concepts. Okay, this is where the fun begins, because we're going to merge the key and related concepts to form our conceptual understanding. And so going back to the conceptual understanding is broad, it's transferable, short and sweet, and student-friendly in language. All right, so here we go. You'll see I've color-coded it to make it a little bit easier to follow along. So the key concept, this is an example that I've taken. This is from the design guide. So the key concept is communities. The 2 related concepts are perspectives and evaluation. So putting that together in a sentence, my conceptual understanding is communities can have many different perspectives that influence the way ideas are evaluated. So if you've been working along with your own student guide and you've managed to put together a conceptual understanding, please feel free to share it at any time, or after this session, just share it with the hashtag MYP Meetup. All right, so we're going to move on to formulating a statement of inquiry. So the statement of inquiry, so we've got our conceptual understanding. We've used the one key concept, the related concepts. Now we're going to move into the global context and exploration. We're going to put all 3 of these together to develop our statement of inquiry. So these three components, we're just going to mix it together. The global context. So these are the 6 global contexts of the MYP, and these frame our conceptual understandings with really meaningful contexts of learning beyond the key concepts and related concepts. So these are the 6 global contexts: identities and relationships, orientation in space and time, personal and cultural expression, scientific and technical innovation, globalization and sustainability, and fairness and development. These help us create really relevant and engaging units of inquiry and give us deeper reasons for learning and extend our students' thinking even further, like I said before, beyond the concepts and related concepts. And they provide a common language and that contextual learning throughout all our subject areas, whether it's design or PE or language and literature. So when teachers select a global context for learning, these are the questions that we're answering. We're thinking about why we're engaged in the unit. So we might choose identities and relationship to give that richer depth of learning. Why are the concepts we've chosen important? So we've chosen the concepts. Why is it important under the framework of personal and cultural expression? Why is it important for me to understand? Why do people care about this topic? So these MYP global contexts provide common points for entry for inquiry, and it helps us to be internationally minded and to have a real intercultural understanding and global engagement. The global context, we can go into great depth, but if you'd like to take a deeper dive into global context, I think it's Ashley Coates' session after mine, and he'll be doing a whole workshop on the global context. So in your From Principles into Practice, you'll see this really important table, because when we're looking for the global context, in our statement of inquiry, we're using the language of the explorations. So this table, in the first column, you'll see all 6 of the global contexts. And then in the next column, you'll see the focus question and description of each context. So if we're looking at identities and relationships, we're looking at who am I, who are we, and exploring identity and beliefs and values. So if you go to the last column, you'll see the possible explorations to develop. So for the example I'm showing you here, I'm going to choose scientific and technical innovations, and I'm using discoveries. I'm going to look at principles and discoveries. So the last slide was really text heavy, so I've just taken out, like zoomed into the global context that I'm going to use. So the one I'm using is scientific and technical innovation, how we understand the world in which we live, the natural world and its laws. The exploration I'm looking at is discovery. So that's a language I'm going to use in my statement of inquiry. So Shraddha, do we have any questions so far? I hope I'm not moving too quickly.
No, I don't think so, but there are a few questions. There are a lot of questions on how to make the statement of inquiry more accessible for students,
Yes.
and frame them in a way that it's student friendly and it doesn't get lost in all the jargon that there is. But guys, I'm going to reserve that question for a little later, because there are a few examples, Nat, that you're sharing as well, right?
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you. So keep typing away. And
yeah, but there are some like a few foundational questions that I think we can knock off right away before you build further understanding, if that's fine.
Yep.
Okay, so a few quick questions. So over here, Pierre, for example, asked, do we have to explore all the key concepts of our subject in 1 year?
No, you have to do them well. You can, the goal is to go through them in the child's education. So if your MYP is running for 3 years, you'd want to make sure that they've had that exposure to all of them. The IB stand is, we would much rather that you have the in-depth learning than a very surface learning of you're trying to get too many key concepts. So just being responsible for 3 or 4 of the key concepts, you might like to do one twice, or you might choose one outside of the ones you're responsible for. They're suggestions. So the 3 or 4, they're the ones that you should focus on, but you can always move outside the key concepts as well.
Got it. Another quick question. In the statement of inquiry, can we include more than one aspect from the explorations of global concepts? For examples, can we use both risk and modernization from science and scientific and technical innovation?
Yes, yes, you can. As long as it's purposeful and it doesn't get too busy. So some people will say, well, you know, maybe I can fit in 2 key concepts and 4 of the do what you do really well. But with the explorations, absolutely, if you can see that naturally and logically it fits in, then that's always great to do.
I think we'll pause on the questions for now,
Right.
but keep them coming and please keep adding them to the Q&A, and we'll pause again soon for questions.
Beautiful. Okay, so having a look at the statement of inquiry, we've got our key concept, which was communities, our related concepts, which was perspectives and evaluation, and then our global context and exploration. Now, we're using the language of the exploration, so we're not actually putting scientific and technical innovation in our statement of inquiry. We're going to that column where the explorations were. So the exploration I'm looking at is discoveries. So if you remember back to my conceptual understanding statement, it was just communities can have many different perspectives that influence the way ideas are evaluated. I'm extending this to create my statement of inquiry, which includes a global context exploration. So now it reads, and new discoveries are made. So using the exploration is really important. It's not getting too wordy. So it's really accessible to the kids and it's meaningful. The words can go in any order. It just so happens, I've noticed with this example, I've gone key concept related and global context. You can start with discoveries are made and move on that way. It doesn't have to be in a particular order, but I've gone this way and color coded it just to make it really easy to see how it's formulated. So there you go, that's a statement of inquiry. You'll see that I've put in the qualifier, so communities can have. If it's not true all the time, or I think it was at the beginning of the session, someone had said the statement of inquiry allows for, you know, a debatable conversation. That's always good to put in a qualifier because it allows that debate to happen and that conversation to happen. So I know it's a lot to ask, but Shada, has anyone developed a statement of inquiry? Have they had their subject guides and they've worked along with me? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, no, I just said no. I see a lot of questions, but not statements of inquiry yet.
That's all right.
But I see one. Communication through poetry allows us to express ourselves through creativity and stylistic choices.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, well, I'm really hoping after this session that you can hashtag MYP meetup, and I'd love to read
see
lots
more
of inquiries. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Shada.
I see a few more now in case you wanted to take a few more.
Please.
Okay. Yeah. There's one on global interactions of human-made systems and individual choices made may have an impact on sustainability of resources. There's one saying by Chahat. Adam says, words across and within text explore themes and shapes our understanding of our identities and relationships. Amazing. And yeah, we have quite a few more in there now.
Look how quickly they've done it. I am super impressed. I am super impressed because they're really difficult. I know many times I've sat in collaborative groups going, oh my goodness, it's taken us so very long. So I'm super impressed, Shraddha. All right, so looking at the statement of inquiry, it's really important that our summative assessment tasks are directly linked to our statement of inquiry. If we're saying that our statement of inquiry is what we're teaching and why, then our assessment has to honour that statement of inquiry and provide opportunities for students to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding and skills. So when we're planning assessments of learning, as educators, the questions we're asking are, how does the assessment task relate to the statement of inquiry? So it can't be separate. We can't have a statement of inquiry that's saying this is what we're going to discover and look into and inquire into, and then our summative assessment task has no link to the statement of inquiry. It's really important that as the students are learning, that they're able to apply it, and it's not just that regurgitation of facts, but they're actually applying their skills. So we're looking at how it relates to the statement of inquiry, how can we create meaningful assessments, and how can we collect evidence of learning. So a lot of considerations are made within our assessment, and I'd love to have a whole other workshop on assessment. So, but I did think in this workshop, when we do develop a statement of inquiry, that it's important also to look at the assessment and how we're going to assess it authentically. So I've got an example here, and this, I'm sure lots of you are aware of grasps. This is only one technique for creating authentic assessments, and there's many, many others like raft and soapstone, like lots and lots. But I wanted to use this Wiggins and McTighe one. It's fantastic. It's through Understanding by Design. If you don't have that text, it's one that I have really close. It's always on my desk. This helps develop a performance task. And I want to talk about the difference between setting an assessment as a straightforward exercise and a performance task. So if we're setting an assessment which is very standardized and it relies heavily on memory, and we're just getting the children to regurgitate facts, so we're testing them on their memory, that's a very standard assessment task. But what we're talking about here is a performance task, and a performance task sets a problem, and it's a problem that needs to be solved. And we know as teachers that when we're solving problems, it involves an integration of knowledge and the skills that we've learned, and we apply it to a problem. And this is designed to really simulate real world problems. So we're moving the children beyond the classroom walls, and all the skills that they've learned throughout the inquiry unit, that they're going to apply it in the summative assessment task. And Wiggins and McTighe talk about when we present problems, that we provide evidence of genuine understanding. So if you present the above to your students, I've just set it up as quite a skeleton there with minimal information. You can put a lot more there. You would communicate the goal. So the G up the top, goal, what do I want the students to achieve? And I'll show you an example of this in the next slide. But that would be your statement of inquiry. With the R, it's your role. What will the student's role be? And then you need to give them an audience. So who is the audience for the student to present their work to or with? And then you need to give them a context, a situation or a challenge. Then the P is a performance. So what do you want them to present? Is it an essay? Is it a podcast? Are they creating something or developing something? And then the S is the summative task, and this is where you'd put in the criterion A, B, C, or D. So let's have a look. So again, this one's taken from McTighe and Wiggins, so Understanding by Design. So this one you'll see for the goal. The goal is to show an understanding of how And then I've put in my statement of inquiry of how communities can have many different perspectives that influence the way ideas are developed and evaluated and new discoveries are made. Then you can fill out the R, which is a role. So you might say to them, you are an architect, or you are a member of local council, or you are the school principal or town planner. Then you need to give them an audience, which could be, they could be in the local community or UN delegates, and then clients. Who are their clients? Oh, sorry. And then the situation, the context you find yourself within, the performance, and then the summative. And that's your performance needs to, your work will be judged by it. And this is where you can put in your task-specific clarifications. So the students are really aware of what the expectations are. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time as teachers, we've developed our statement of inquiry. We're going to move on now to how do you engage your students? So I've got the little share button there, so I'd be really interested. So you've developed your statement of inquiry. Do you just pop it up on the board, or are there some other ways that you introduce the statement of inquiry to your students and engage them? So I'd really love for you to share some of these ideas of how you present it.
I'm expecting a lot of responses to this one.
These people are awesome. I wish I could see them.
No, I'm going to share this with you so you can see the entire breadth of conversation.
Oh, thank you.
And there's been a lot of questions on student involvement, right? So I'm sure this section is going to be great. Chahat says at times they play a treasure hunt with them so they can uncover the SOI. Felicity says through hands-on examples. I see that a few folks are also they do student unpacking of the SOI. In math, Yalda says generalizing relationships between, okay, I see an SOI there sneakily in the middle, an SOI has been slipped. Through provocations and in groups, Jack asks the students to create the factual, conceptual, and debatable questions. Again, I see a lot of folks saying provocations through think, pair, shares, asking questions, brainstorming. A few teachers are putting out the SOI and then unpacking it, as I said. See, think, wonder. So I think a combination of 3 or 4 things, Nat, that I'm seeing. Yeah, visible like thinking routines, as well as just unpacking the SOI. And then also, of course, the teachers were also using provocations to begin a conversation.
Wow, I love that. Thank you, Shraddha. I love that people are really honouring the statement of inquiry and making sure that they're drawing students in. So, okay, so here are a couple of examples. So you can give each group the lines of inquiry or the key concepts and related concepts and the global explorations, and get them to establish a statement of inquiry and see how it matches up with the one that you've designed. Sometimes you might actually take on the ones that the students have developed and share yours, and it's really important that you get them to see the process as well. So you can present them with the key concepts, related concepts, and see how they go with it, which is really cool. And this was another one that I've seen a teacher do, which I really loved, and it was an interactive one. And you can print out the statement of inquiry and cut out each word, or just pop it on Post-it notes. And then you just scramble them up, pop them in envelopes and give them to students individually or in groups. And then it's their responsibility to put them together into a logical order. So I really like that one. That's pretty cool. Okay, so here's some helpful hints when writing a statement of inquiry. You want to use student-friendly language. Make sure that it's accessible to them. You're not getting caught up in that edu-speak, but it's something that is meaningful. It should contain at least 2 concepts. So 1 key concept, 1 or 2 related concepts. Try not to put too many in to make it too wordy. Simple is always better. It should make reference to a global context exploration. So we're not using the global context, we're not using scientific and technical innovation, we're just using one of the explorations. And you can move beyond those explorations and create your own, but that's the language you're using. So have a look at your guide. Make sure you're using your subject guide and your From Principles into Practice. And you should use a qualifier such as may, often, or can, and try and make it transferable. So you could use that statement of inquiry for language and literature, or design, or the arts. Okay, so you'll remember this beautiful little blob tree that we looked at the beginning of our session. Have a little think. How are you feeling now? Are you still feeling the same, or has there been a shift? Have a look at the little blob characters all along this tree. Study some of them and pop in the chat box. How are you feeling about developing a statement of inquiry? So you're going back to work on Monday or Tuesday. How are you feeling?
Okay, so a few responses coming in. Amal says, on top of the tree. Carla says, touch confident. Elizabeth says, cuddling the blob in the middle. Okay. Still hanging in there. Tasha says, feeling more confident. So definitely a lot of people steadily, I think, moving a little more higher. Madame says, Obey says, moving up the tree, the blob staying in the tree. Yes, but I think this is also going to switch a little bit, Nat, post your answering of many questions that have come in. So hopefully there are more people who are standing right up top that tree after the questions are answered as well.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you, Shraddha. Even now, I've been working within the MYP for quite a long time. You know, I still have moments where I'm, maybe that little person lying on the grass feeling a bit grumpy or just hanging in there. So it's okay. We'll all get there. We'll all get there. Thank you, Shraddha.
For sure. And great, Nat. If we can quickly maybe go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Okay, so this is just some support for unit planning. It's not an exhaustive list. However, it's a great start of where to find support if you do need some. The Program Resource Centre and teacher support materials on MyIB and IBO are really helpful. And if you go to program community groups, there's lots of groups there. If you can't find the group that you're looking for, then feel free to just create one and invite people in. The documents that you should have on hand is your subject-specific guide. It's really important. It should be accessible and you should be really familiar with that. Program standards and practices. And there's a really great IB document called Evaluating MYP Unit Plans, which is really helpful when you're planning. And then there's always a community. The IB has their Twitter group. Obviously, Toddle has some really amazing support. The IB PYP Community Network group, and there's some community blogs as well. All right, I think this one's over to you, Shraddha.
Yeah, for sure. And if you can just click one more time, this was actually brought up by Jen Robbins in the audience as well. So thanks, Jen. I just wanted to quickly, highlight just something in the Toddle planner that will hopefully make SOI creation a little more easier and like streamlined for all of you. As Jen said, there is that little bulb icon that you can see there, which also just keeps redirecting you towards this useful information that you can see in the panel here. And it also basically, gives you a bird's eye view of the overview, the learning experiences, assessments, unit resources continuously throughout the course of the planner. So that's an easy link that you can keep making. And if you can go to the next slide, Nat, what we also have is, just a little feature wherein you can delve and elaborate on the relationship between the summative assessment task and the statement of inquiry, so that everything is being planned out and fleshed out in that manner. So, if you're keen to sort of explore the platform further as well, feel free to sort of write in, as put in the chat box, like write into MISPA, Toddle app, or even book a free demo, and we're happy to sort of give you a walkthrough of the platform. Thanks, Nat. And if you can go to the next slide, please. Moment I think many people have been waiting for, given all the questions that they've been plopping in. So Nat, a few questions, and I've kind of divided them into two different things, right? One kind of focusing on stakeholders, being both students as well as how do you work with other teachers on co-constructing SOIs and being on the same page about them. And the second being more just questions pertaining to the SOI itself. So I'll jump right in. There's a question that came in which says, how do I transfer the statement of inquiry to other subjects? For example, some areas of study in science are very particular to the subject. So how can this be made more transferable?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So ideally you could transfer it, but there is going to be some times, especially in maths and in science, where you do have some very specific knowledge bank that you need to teach. So it will be scientific in nature, but you could also transfer those scientific concepts into the arts with just a switch of a key concept or related concept. So when we can, it's good to keep it transferable, but it's not going to be ideal all the time. So don't worry. You can use the word, scientists in your statement of inquiry, and that could relate to even art or health and PE. So you might be looking at something in health and PE, and you're looking at it through the lens of a scientist. That was a good question.
Got it. The next question here is, is there a need to I think this is from Pierre, if I'm not wrong, is there a need to constantly change the statement of inquiry year on year? And if there is, then why? Because the set of students are changing yearly. So why are we consistently changing the SOI? Can we just revise it yearly, but not necessarily change it? I guess from your experience, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, see, I always think you spend so much time. It's great I love that they've used the word revise, because what we're saying, it's not going to just stay like that forevermore, but we might look at it and say, hey, this worked really well last year. Let's stick with this. Or we might revise it, or there might be opportunities where we say that didn't work, let's start again. But we shouldn't just change things for change's sake. If it works really well, I say stick with it and enhance it and work with it. That's why in the unit planners, there's that beautiful section on reflection that gives real honour to reflection, that we look back and say, how did this unit work over the past 6 weeks, and we can pop it in that reflection section. And it might be, this was fantastic, it worked really well. Next time we might have the excursion at the beginning of the unit rather than at the end as a culminating thing.
Yep.
But that reflection is really important. So, I agree with that person. There's no need to have completely different ones every year.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to slowly, I think, segue into a lot of the student questions, and then we can come back to these larger generic ones as well.
Yeah.
So quite a few educators through the conversation have been saying, how do we make this more student friendly? One specific question is, to make it more student friendly, can we actually use synonyms? Students find it really hard sometimes to understand concepts, even after the SOI has been unpacked. So you did share a few examples. But in your perspective, what are some things that you've done to sort of just break down any heavy jargon and make it more accessible?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because sometimes it depends on your context of students. If they are really struggling with something, it doesn't mean we shouldn't still present it to them.
Yeah.
We still give that opportunity. We present the concepts and the context, but we do need to break it down and give those synonyms. Say this is and give those real life examples and try and have that application where they're going, oh, okay, so when we're talking about form or when we're talking about function, this is what this means. And also that opportunity. So you might be looking at, I know in history we looked at systems. So we looked at the systems in World War II. But then in science, they looked at body systems. And so we had to really delve into what is a system and give lots of different examples of what a system looked like and made sure that it was transferable. So whatever you need to do as educators, you know your students the best. If you need to tweak it a little bit, then please do that to make sure that it's accessible to all your students for learning.
Got it. And connectedly, you know, around the piece of stakeholders, I guess, how do we ensure, this is a question from Jacqueline, she says, how do we ensure that the teachers have a shared understanding of the SOI? We've crafted SOIs together, but sometimes we find that we've approached a unit in very different ways because we have a very different understanding of statements of inquiry. So as a coordinator, from your experience, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering, is it that the statement of inquiry has been created and then people have interpreted it differently, or if it's the construction of a statement of inquiry? So I'll kind of answer both a little bit.
I think, yeah.
If it's the construction of a statement of inquiry, I think it's making it very clear. And I know I went through it very methodically and almost recipe-like, and you don't have to go through it like that, but that just gives that shared understanding of this is what a statement of inquiry should look like. These are the components, and that's why we have the conceptual understanding and move to the statement of inquiry. So if there is a conflict in understanding how to construct a statement of inquiry, the best thing is to have a conversation with your coordinator so everyone's got that shared understanding. If it is an interpretation of the statement of inquiry, so you've gone on completely different tangents, which can sometimes happen, I think that's when in your unit planner, you have that reflection before the planning starts. So you sit down as a group and say, okay, so what opportunities do we think are open to these kids? Where do we think this might be going? And having those check-ins. With the MYP, there is that expectation of weekly collaborative planning, and that's what should frame those discussions of what's happening with our inquiry units, where are they going, and getting some people back on track because some people might need some support with that. Which, I think the collaborative planning is a really important part of the MYP. It's quite unique because I know with teaching 11 to 16-year-olds, sometimes subjects can be in silos. So the maths teacher teaches their class and the other maths teacher, whereas it's mandated with the IB that you do plan collaboratively to try and overcome some of those problems that happen.
Thanks for that. I think, connectedly, I guess for students, going back to like the students piece of this, there's a question from Callum where he says, how can students form the inquiry questions when they don't know the contents to be covered? I guess something else that I'm seeing to that is, how do you scaffold this for students in a way that's beyond just simplifying the definitions? So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so every school will have their state or national requirements. So in Melbourne or in Victoria, we'll have our Victorian curriculum, and you can show them what the expectation is. So I'll go back to history. So in year 10, you are taught about World War II. And so that's the content. So then knowing that's the content, that's when you can move with the students to say, okay, what do we want to look at conceptually? Do we want to look at the relationships between countries in the war? Or are we looking at the systems? What systems are in place? Or are we looking at communication? How do people communicate during this time? So once they know, and it's a great question because they don't know what they don't know. So if you're giving them, and if you go back to the start of this workshop when we talked about the big idea,
Yeah.
If you share that big idea with them and say, this is what we're looking at, this is going to be our inquiry, from which lens do we want to look at it through? How do we want to delve a little bit deeper into something like World War I or World War II, or we're looking at in health and PE, you're doing aesthetic movement. What do we want to have a look at? What do we want to inquire into? So I would be presenting to the students the big idea, and then going through the key concepts and related concepts, and also, you could even present to the students 3 different statements of inquiry with different, and saying to them, which one do you think is more interesting? What do you want to look at? What lens do you want to look through, and really engage them that way? The more ownership that the students get of their learning, the more buy-in, the more engagement you'll get from them.
Thanks for that, Nat. Another question that came in from 2 different people was about the whole, like, what comes first, the topic or the SOI? So Jace Joshua, for example, says, should we think of the topics first before formulating the statement of inquiry, or is it the other way around? So for teachers who are like slightly new to this, what is a way that's worked for you?
Yeah, I think you've always, like I was saying before, you've always got those state and national requirements of the curriculum. So the MYP really is just the framework of how you're delivering this curriculum. So you do really need to start with the big idea. What are we teaching? What is the content we need to teach, and how can we teach it in a really interesting and accessible way where the kids are developing skills, and we're moving away from just that regurgitation of facts, making it a little bit more palatable where they can look at author intention and things like that. And it doesn't matter which text we use, but if your state says these are the texts you need to read, then that's when you can develop your statement of inquiry and look at perspective or conflict through that. So yeah, it's sometimes a statement of inquiry comes first, but realistically, we know the big idea, and that's when we move to the statement.
I think we can take one more question. So Shruti, for example, says, is there an ideal place or point in the unit to discuss the statement of inquiry and the underlying key concepts, global concepts, and everything else with the students? For maths, she says she finds it difficult to talk about these concepts at the beginning of the unit, especially with younger grades like MYP 1 and 2. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Listen, that's a great one. And this is why we really encourage, as a MYP coordinator, I'd encourage the statement of inquiry is displayed up on the wall, because you need to address it many times. So it wouldn't just happen at the beginning of the unit and then you forget about it. We're going back to it because the meaning might be lost. And it's a really great point this teachers raise, that sometimes the MYP ones, this is very new. And so if they only have one opportunity to engage with the statement of inquiry, you're missing a lot of learning opportunities. So I'd have it up on the wall displayed. So halfway through, you'd go back to it and you'd have a look. And I also really encourage my teachers not to, at the end of the 6 weeks, take everything down and put new things up. Leave it up. Leave as much up as you can, because when you go to the next unit that you're engaging the kids in, you might go, remember in our last unit we talked about we talked about audience imperative, or we talked about, we're doing this again. So it's not, knowledge isn't in little silos of 6 weeks, that they can see it continual and seeing it as a resource. And it'd be lovely to see, 4 or 5 statements of inquiry up displayed that you can keep drawing on. So no, I really like that one. When do you introduce it? Yep, not just once, you just keep going. Great question.
No, thanks so much for your time on this, and thanks to everybody on the chat as well. It's a very nice community there who's, they're just answering each other's questions, and that's always so wonderful for us to see. As we discussed as well, please don't let the learning stop here. This was a very quick session on statement of inquiry. As you can see, there's so much more to unpack here. But thanks a lot, Nat, for making time to share your experiences and learnings. And to everybody else, we're just getting the day started. We have a day full of sessions like this and many more for you. So the next session is actually a deep dive on the global context by Ashley Coates, and it's a Zoom meeting room. So just an FYI on that, your videos will be on when you pop in, and then Ashley has some interesting breakout rooms and things like that planned for you as well. So head on over. And once I end the session, you'll see a really short survey pop up on your screen. So if you can just quickly give us your feedback before you go to the next session, that would be wonderful. So thanks again, Nat. Thank you for your time. And thanks to everybody who joined us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you. See you at the next session.
Bye.